Hi everyone, and welcome to the ARA's webinar for the week, How to Benefit from a Customer Focus. My name is Emma Woods and I'm the Director of Corporate Services at the ARA, and I've got the pleasure of facilitating today's webinar for you all. I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional landowners. For me, the ARA office is in Canberra, and so for me it's the Ngunnawal people. I pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging. I'd also like to acknowledge our webinar sponsor, Frauscher. A big thank you to them for their support. They help us make sure that we can provide these webinar series for our members and also non-members within the industry. Today we're going to be hearing from two customer experience experts within rail, Yvette Mihelic from John Holland and Tilly Loughborough from Metro Trains Melbourne. Together they're going to take us through the importance of prioritising the customer experience through all areas of the business and all stages of a project, so right from planning through to implementation. Yvette's going to speak first, and she's going to outline why the customer experience is important, and she's going to take us through some of the key theories, strategies and research that sits behind providing good customer experience. She's also going to provide a vital detail around the link between the customer and the profit and loss statement. Tilly's then going to jump in and provide the practical perspective, and she's going to talk us through how Metro Trains Melbourne collaborated with the Department of Transport in Victoria and implemented a significant change so that they could continue delivering services with a customer focus through 3 lockdowns. We're then going to provide time for questions and answers, and so I encourage you all to put your questions into the system using the little question mark icon at any time throughout the presentations, and I'll then throw to those at the end. So I will introduce our two presenters for today. Yvette Mihelic is the Director of Customer Experience for Rail at John Holland. She joined John Holland in 2019 and is responsible for the design, development and delivery of customer experience for the rail ops and maintenance business. Yvette has over 20 years cross-industry and sector customer experience, operational leadership and strategy expertise, and has a niche focus in transport. Tilly is the General Manager of Passenger Experience at MTM. She also joined MTM in 2019, and she's accountable for the overall customer experience at 222 train stations and has a team of just under 2,000 people who are primarily frontline staff responsible for delivering directly to the customer. Tilly also has almost 20 years of global experience and has an in-depth knowledge of public transport operations and specialises in putting the customer at the heart of all decisions from design through to delivery. A big thank you to Yvette and Tilly for joining us today and sharing their insights and expertise with us. Yvette, as I said, we're going to throw to you first, so welcome and thank you for joining us.
Thanks so much, Emma, for that wonderful introduction. I've been looking forward to today and sharing my insights and experience with you all. I would also like to pay my respects to the traditional owners of this land where we meet, and for me today in Sydney, it's the people of the Eora Nation. And I would like to pay my respects to elders, past, present and emerging. Can we just go to the next slide, please? Today's discussion will combine an overview of customer experience at a global, Australian and local level with a deep dive case study into Metro Trains Melbourne, as Emma mentioned before. Firstly, I'd like to provide you with a really high-level overview of John Holland. John Holland is a proud 20% shareholder in Metro Trains Melbourne, and that's why we thought it'd be important to actually share part of our business with you and bring what we're going to talk about to life. More broadly, John Holland transforms communities to make them easier to move around, more connected and better to live in. Essentially, we're up for the challenge of improving lives. We're caring, empowering, imaginative and also future focused, and this translates into every single thing that we do. We find solutions throughout any point of a project life cycle, from origination, financing and development design, through to construction operations and maintenance. And we do this across 14 different industry sectors, and obviously that includes transport and rail. Across our operations, we currently deliver over 280 million customer journeys per year. We employ well over 13,000 people. We maintain over 4,000 kilometres of track, and we operate and maintain 286 passenger rail vehicles. Most importantly, to those where customer experience is near and dear, we actually impact the lives of over 20 million community members each and every year. We can just go to the next slide, thanks. Our session today is to share how integral to commercial benefits customer experience really is. Regardless of what life cycle stage a railway is at, from the design and construction phase right through to operations and maintenance, to achieve financial sustainability, customer experience must be front and centre. Equally, operators need to be agile and be able to actively collaborate with their partners, clients and community to ensure customer satisfaction. Just move on. Traditionally, customer perception of public transport is informed by the organisation's ability to run its services regardless of mode, on time and without disruption. This view is changing, with customers having an increasing range of alternatives to undertake their journey. Additionally, public transport is seen as a bit of a grudge purchase, kind of like a necessary evil for many. And as such, being able to improve customer experience is critical for sustained patronage growth. On a global scale, up until 2020, the use of rail as a preferred mode of transport has grown above system. Interestingly though, Australia did not entirely mirror this trend. Growth rates across the states have varied, with Sydney being the standout, having significant increases, which have widely been attributed to the focus and investment of improvement in customer experience. Up until 2020, there have been a number of factors driving the global rail patronage growth, including how the cost of car ownership and operation has increased significantly. Basically, car ownership globally is flatlining or actually decreasing per capita. And this is indicating a move to alternative transport options, which obviously include rail. There's also congestion. Customers are really starting to value their time more, and they view their time sitting in traffic as not only frustrating, but also unproductive. There's also been growing social and environmental consciousness, resulting in a real modal shift from that carbon-hungry private car through to more environmentally green solutions such as public transport. And there's also been massive improvements in availability of rail networks, which has occurred through massive increases in infrastructure spending. This means that more customers have access to rail's transport and then choose to use it. The events of last year have seen a significant shift in the use of rail and of public transport generally as a preferred means of transport. And unfortunately, several factors have specifically led to this change, including the lockdowns that have occurred all over Australia and globally. And obviously, I'll let Tilly share with you MTM's individual experience here. Governments have also been encouraging private car usage. Now, this has created a bit of a reverse of the modal shift that has been concentrated on for several years prior to that. There's also been increased flexible working and working from home, with the levels of hours worked in the office unlikely to reach pre-COVID levels for at least some time to come. There's also been increased unemployment. And while there's been some improvement in this key economic measure, so for example, in January this year it was 6.2%, in February it was 5.8%. There is still some way to go, and there's still high unemployment considered in some particular parts of Australia. There's also social distancing requirements, resulting in a significantly depleted capacity level across networks, where some are being mandated around that 1.5 or even further for distancing. There's also a fear of transmission across the community, and this is creating real fear, and customers are seeking alternative transport options that they consider safer. Last but not least, there's also a lack of social and other events, and this actually reduces the unusual journeys for customers and ultimately, of course, patronage overall. So while the impact severity of what I've just described has varied across jurisdictions, each railway is still feeling the effects by way of reduced patronage and increased costs to deliver services. And this is because of sometimes increased requirements around cleaning, the provision of additional PPE for our employees, as well as additional policies, processes and policies that have had to be put in place. Even with reduced patronage, many operators are maintaining and in some instances increasing timetabled services. And this effectively creates an ever-increasing yawning gap between the fare box and the total cost to deliver services. Can we just have the next slide, thanks? And I can almost see you all out there thinking, but customer experience is all that light and fluffy stuff. It really does nothing but help us get our customer satisfaction KPIs. And traditionally, it has been difficult to monetize the value of that customer experience adds to an operator or a jurisdiction. However, over the last few years, a lot of cross-industry research has resulted in the identification of a number of direct linkages between customer experience and revenue. And this occurs for us through increased patronage, reduced vandalism, and an increase in the delivery of value add versus non-value add investments. While some organisations have developed internal capabilities for customer experience, these are often reactive or as a result of contract requirements, rather than having a proactive approach that can lead to sustainable improvements in not only customer satisfaction KPIs, but also patronage and a reduced cost to serve. There are a few things that need to be considered for every operation in order to optimise the value of customer experience. A big part is that understanding of what good customer experience looks like. Can we move on, please? And understanding what a good customer experience requires us to know our customers. We know that commuters typically make up between 63 and 76% of travellers across the ANZ rail networks. And this group of customers, on average, pay full fare, and they use your network at least 8 times a week, up until COVID hit anyway. This is a good segment to focus on, obviously, but given they tend to travel during the peak periods, how do we attract those that travel outside of these times? How do we get more members of the community and visitors to our cities to use our rail networks more often? I've got a couple of questions for you. Firstly, who are your customers? Because right now it's important to start to think like a marketer. Who is your customer base? And who is your target market? By undertaking research and analytics, you can identify who you need to focus on and what makes them tick. Building customer personas, which I've got an example on the bottom left, allows you to categorise different customer types that may either use or consider to use your network. The key to developing your personas is heavily reliant on data analytics and insight development. And for the purposes of simplifying the key data sets, they include demographic segmentation, which includes, what are the unique features of customer segment types, such as job type, social and economic status. There's also customer goals. What is the most important thing to customers? Is it reliability, comfort, or is it speed? What is the geographic segmentation? So where are the customers located across the network? And how do they travel? More importantly, how would they like to travel? And lastly is interaction frequency. How often do customers use the rail network, considering things like what times and what days? Once you've identified your personas, understanding how customers interact with your operation provides you with further insight into where to focus attention and focus so that it derives the most value from investment. We develop customer journey maps, which involve working through each part of the journey. This should include all elements of a customer journey, right from research and planning all the way through the trip to arrival at their final destination. This means it's more than just more than just your station or stop and then onboard your vehicle. Each persona should have more than one customer journey. For example, a commuter may have their regular morning peak trip, but you should also consider how to capture more of their share of their travel wallet and map out a weekend visit to an event, for example. By mapping out each of these journeys and understanding where the pain points are throughout these journeys, you can then map this back to your customer satisfaction drivers that influence the likelihood of customers to use your service. With clarity down to this detail, you're able to identify the prioritisation of where and what in the journey you need to invest in to make improvements so that it provides the most impact to your journeys and the most return on your investment. For example, we often trial bigger, better, faster technology when we really don't need to, as it may not actually drive customer satisfaction. Delivering new expensive trip planning functionality in an app for your customers may be a waste of time if they only use Google Maps or Waze and aren't considering to use anything else. On the other hand, a small investment in training your drivers to make clearer announcements during disruption, which may be able to be done in-house, may have significant improvements in satisfaction, particularly around information provision, at a fraction of the cost. Most importantly, never underestimate the impact of behind-the-scenes functions on overall customer experience. International research has demonstrated that reliable, on-time trips that get customers to where they want to go promptly and safely is more important to most customers than the colour of street furniture on a platform or stop. Creating a culture that is focused on high-performance customer experience through the breadth and depth of your organisation is essential. This culture needs to be focused on connecting with your customers. Next slide, please. Rail businesses really need to be centred around their customers to satisfy the needs of different segments or personas. This includes creating connections with our customers to drive and sustain real change in the delivery of our services. With ever more parties involved along the public transport supply chain, and with our customers expecting continual access to information and services, connectivity is critical. The right connection enables our organisations to manage internal and external relationships and ensure that every employee, including suppliers and partners, is totally focused on the customer journey. Connectivity also means tapping into the right technologies to drive future strategy and to create a connected customer experience. Organisations that exemplify this approach exhibit 4 key characteristics. First is excellence. So connected excellence means customer strategy is well articulated, communicated and implemented, and it has a defined experience for each customer segment. In an engaged business, the entire culture supports customer centricity and the customer strategy. Employees are constantly thinking about how they can differentiate the experience for every customer interaction, and they're encouraged to come up with new and better ways to meet customer needs, and are given a degree of freedom to put such ideas into action, such as vanity projects. In a customer-centric business, the voice of customer dictates the design and the delivery of services. Surveys and research alone will not drive change. A wider voice of customer program pulls together data from multiple internal and external sources to provide a single view of what individuals and businesses really want from your network. The customer journey is at the heart of customer experience economics. Each stage in the journey provides significant opportunities to reduce costs and improve revenue. A recent Forrester study suggests that across multiple sectors, brands that improve customer journeys enjoy revenue increases of 10 to 15%, while lowering costs to serve by 15 to 20%. By connecting your culture with the customer journey and aligning this connection throughout all actions and activities within your business, you're able to increase the momentum of change within your organisation. The delivery of valuable change is critical so that any investment will provide a positive return for your customers and for your bottom line. Using tested methodology to affect change and deliver any strategy or project that impacts customer experience is crucial for success. Over the last 2 decades in particular, the use of Agile has spread from an ICT delivery domain to be adopted as best practice across industry and sector. Most organisations claim to be Agile, but when the wheels hit the rails, that's not always the case. Next slide, please. Now, as I mentioned, Agile isn't new, or it's not just a fad either. Simply put, Agile is a set of principles that allows leaders, teams, and entire organisations to anticipate and respond to change in an effective way. To classify yourself as an Agile organisation, you must exhibit 5 trademarks consistently, with each trademark having its own core principles. For strategy, this includes principles including a shared purpose and vision, being able to sense and seize opportunities, and being able to flex resource allocation to where it's most needed and when. Structure means having a clear, flat structure with accountable roles and hands-on governance to inspect what you expect, as well as robust communities of practice and active partnerships that deliver mutually beneficial outcomes. For process, this includes rapid iteration and experimentation, standardised ways of working, information transparency, and a focus on action-orientated decision-making and performance. For people, this trademark has core principles of a cohesive community, shared and servant leadership, entrepreneurial drive, and role mobility. And last, technology. Definitely not least. Technology does include evolving technology architecture, systems, and tools, as well as next generation technology development and delivery practices. It's less about the tech and more about how you implement it. These trademarks and core principles provide a foundation of agility throughout your organisation. Leveraging these principles enables better and more sustainable outcomes that are focused on continuous improvement and the betterment of all KPIs. Being able to deliver services and drive improvements in customer experience, and therefore the P&L, also requires collaboration across different functions in the organisation. By approaching the provision of rail services in a holistic manner, meaning the whole customer journey, not just a small part of it, we can provide multifaceted benefits for customers, ourselves, and our clients. I'd like to share a quick example of the embodiment of whole of customer journey consideration, agile thinking, and collaboration, which is demonstrated in the delivery of services for our Torrens Connect in Adelaide. We developed a dedicated customer experience team that was designed as part of the overall strategy during bid phase. This included the establishment of personas and customer journeys, and now that we're in BAU, they're regularly tested and tried. Since our contract commencement, the entire cross-functional leadership team have been working on building and maintaining customer-centric culture, including the development and implementation of the Customer Connect training program. This approach ensures that everybody in Torrens Connect has the customers as their true North Star. All roles from customer service to operations, support and maintenance undertake this training. All key customer outcomes are communicated throughout the organisation, so everyone has a sense of ownership for the delivery of customer experience and understands how their individual role impacts the customers that they serve. There's also been the introduction of the Voice of Customer program, which uses multiple data sets, including customer satisfaction surveys, feedback and observations. Static and trending outcomes are also key, not just one set at a point in time, but how they're improving or essentially heading in the wrong direction and require immediate course correction. Actionable insights are then gained, and they're gained from root cause analysis. And this includes also the validation of success metrics once any actions have been implemented. A particular example of collaboration and agility for Torrens Connect stems from insight from customers and employees that there is existing traffic and tram signalling priority issues across the network. And this was negatively impacting customers through an increase in delays and the community through traffic build-up at key traffic intersections. A cross-functional team worked collaboratively with leads from SAPTA, local councils and the Traffic Management Centre to reconfigure traffic signalling priority. Changes have been implemented within 3 months, and this in 3 months of commencement of actually working on the problem. So this has now enabled trams to flow with less wait times at key intersections, and also resulted in a decrease of 19% of car traffic queues at one key shared location and intersection. And that's the one that's pictured there, which is Jetty Road in Glenelg. All of this was undertaken using agile principles, including having a shared vision for measures of success, flexibility and resourcing with employees across each of the organisations, providing resource and expertise into the project, each of them having entrepreneurial drive to explore options to get things done, as well as evolving technology, systems and tools. Overall, this agile collaboration resulted in better customer outcomes with less delays for tram customers and improved experience for queuing for cars and buses along shared parts of the network. The financial and tangible assets are far-reaching and varied, but I'd like to focus on one particular aspect: customer complaints. So if you undertake a root cause analysis of feedback from customers around speed of journey and regularity of services for tram customers, as well as residents complaining to council around traffic congestion around tram lines, the majority of these can be attributed to the previous traffic signalling systems and processes. Now let's think for a moment that the average customer feedback cost to process, and this is end to end, varies widely, but between $65 and $130. Now, if there's about 1,000 complaints per year that were received by SAPTA, Department of Infrastructure and Transport, and Council, they won't be received anymore. So that's a saving of $65,000 to $130,000 per annum. This does not include fare box opportunity. And what I mean by that is that because there's an improvement in the tram journey, we could say change the minds and have a modal shift, an effect modal shift of 100 commuters per year. What that means is that all of a sudden there's another $792,000 of fare box revenue each and every year as a result of this change. It's a real tangible change and with really tangible results. Overall, I hope you found what I've shared helpful and informative. And while this has highlighted at a very high level the importance of focusing on customer experience, mainly at a theoretical level, I'd like to now pass over to the wonderful Tilly, who will bring this theory to life by sharing the MTM experience. Thank you so much.
Thanks. Hi everyone, it's great to be here alongside you and obviously continuing our working relationship with the involvement with the ARA. I'd also like to, given that I'm in a third location, start by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land where I am in the city of Melbourne at the moment, and pay my respects to the people of the Kulin Nation, to their elders past, present and emerging, before I move on. So as Emma's already introduced, I'm Tilly Loughborough. I'm General Manager Passenger Experience for Metro Trains in Melbourne, and I've been here since July 2019. My portfolio does cover all of our stations, and I'll come on to some characteristics of the network in a short while. But that team of just under 2,000 people is made up of primarily frontline individuals who are either our station team members who are directly liaising with customers each day, our authorised officers who educate in relation to fare compliance, and our passenger relations team who deal with that nice and not so nice correspondence from customers when we're doing things either well or not so well, as well as a small team of people who provide information at our busiest location of Flinders Street. And then overall, I have the responsibility of that customer experience piece. So the purpose of being here today to start and look a little bit at that customer focus. Yvette's obviously taken you through the strategic perspective in terms of gaining that customer focus and how we can get that return on investment. And I'm sure we won't have touched on a whole host of the things that we could probably go into around that metrics piece today. But what I'd really like to focus on is the actual practical application and using a little bit, but not too much, around the landscape of the pandemic and what that's meant for us in terms of gaining that customer focus. Next slide, please, Maria. So our network, before we head into the detail of that customer focus piece, I just want to give you a little bit of background, a little bit of context on the network itself, so it makes some sense when we go into it. For those of you who know our network, you can have a moment or two snooze whilst I go through that. Our network is 222 stations across 15 lines. As you'll see from the map in front of you, we have a huge amount of interactions. So those purple lines you see are with the V-line services, the other heavy rail network. We have many interchange points with tram and also with the bus network, as well as with those active transport methods that have been more focused upon during the last 12 months. Our track is about just under 1,000 kilometres of track, so a fairly significant geographical coverage. And on that track, we've got 226 six-car trains that operate. So that's across 3 different fleets at the moment, so Comenge, Extrapolis and Siemens fleet, and obviously soon to be a 4th in our high-capacity metro trains, which we'll come to a little bit later. Across those stations, we've got a lot of work going on at the moment, and again, I'll come to that in a little more detail. But the really pleasing thing is a lot of those stations, the numbers of new stations or refurbished stations is certainly increasing. And in the last year, Coburg, Moreland, Cheltenham, Mentone are just a few to mention, where we've seen some real investment in the environment at which our customers experience. If I could move to the next slide, please, Maria. So just to give you a little bit of background in terms of our structure, as I'm here presenting with the lovely Yvette today. John Holland Group are one of the consortium of rail and construction businesses that we are owned by. Hong Kong's MTR are a 60% owner in the business, and also UGL, a division of United Group Limited. The fantastic thing that gives us is the ability to draw upon some real great global and local experience from all of those businesses. That real, as we're doing today, sharing of that good practice is a real benefit for us. I like to say we steal with pride because we can take, there's very little in my mind until we are into contract negotiation space that sits in a not able to share space. We are trying to do the best that we can to make the best environment for our customers and the customer experience we provide. So the more we can share that good practice, the better for both the rail network, but more broadly for public transport in Victoria and across Australia and New Zealand. We operate on under a contract with the Department of Transport. Most people will at least know Public Transport Victoria, but that merge took in also roads and highways within the Department of Transport, so a much bigger organisation, but still with public transport really heavily featured in terms of getting things right within that department structure across the Victoria network. Our current contract, which is referred to as MR4, started on the 30th of November 2017 and goes through to the 1st of December 2024. So a 7-year contract, which it's over to the Department of Transport as to the next steps in terms of whether there's an extension or whether there's a move into a new contract. And then the other thing that is key really to our overview at the moment is around that the project work, the big build that's going on in Victoria. Anybody who has visited Victoria will not have been able to escape the amount of change that is going on across the Victoria public transport network. So the level crossing removal project, with a really ambitious target of removing 75 level crossings by 2025, and actually is already through to number 46 of those removals, with the latest being Cherry Street, and another 5 to undertake this year. Melbourne's Metro Tunnel project, which comes fully to fruition towards the end of the contract period I've just referred to, but introduces 5 major new stations, and alongside that, full operation of those high capacity trains and a high capacity signalling. At the moment, we work to absolute full capacity of the network that we have to make sure we can carry as many people on as many services as possible. This opens up that capacity much further and means we really do have a network that's fit for the future. Next slide, please. So moving over into that pandemic space, and I just want to set the scene and take you through the scenario, and I'm sure it's not a dissimilar picture to the trend that you will have seen in your own organisations, particularly where you are in public transport or even in personal life, that those impacts have been probably along the line of this trend in terms of patronage. So if we look at that graph that you see in front of you, when COVID the pandemic first hit at the beginning of March 12 months ago, we saw a significant drop off of patronage from our usual expected levels right the way to being at about 20%. That then increased a little bit as we came out of that first wave. So in that sort of June, July period, we saw some increases in the people travelling with us. But then we obviously hit that all-time low, and that obviously dip that you can see around August into September was that second major wave that we had significant level of cases within Victoria. And our all-time low hit as low as 6%. So we really did only have those essential workers travelling with us. So we were providing a service that was absolutely needed. But we had some very empty trains running around the network as well. So moving on a little bit into that December period, we started to see a pickup, and you'll be able to guess that spike that you see downward trend was around that snap period where we had the short, sharp lockdown. And we've started to see that pickup again. And for me, it was great to come in on the service this morning and actually be in a place where all the seats were taken and a few people were standing, because we are starting to carry those levels of commuters that we were used to seeing travel with us before the pandemic hit. The network is starting to get back to some type of normality, and people starting to feel comfortable to travel, which is absolutely paramount for us. So moving on to the next slide then, and to look at what that's looked like for us in terms of how we've moved through this phase. Our key driver really is quite simple. It's to keep Melbourne moving. That's what we've aimed to do all the way through. And as Yvette's already referred to, that piece around keeping the business as usual has been absolutely imperative to us. So when COVID hit us right at the beginning of that pandemic, we had to quickly shift into that agile focus. And in a positive way, that's enabled us to have ways of operating that we probably wouldn't have had if the pandemic hadn't have hit. So that agile approach, yes, we may have done some things in an agile way, but we were forced to make sure we did that in every area of the business and make sure we truly were moving with the things that were happening on a day-to-day basis and adapt to that ever-changing world that we were faced with. So just talking you through some of those phases and how they sat for us, the forming of a continuity support group. Now that technically was a governance group for us, but actually the difference that I see there in that governance group is it was real time. And anything that changed, that group worked with everybody across the business with key representatives to make sure that we were responding again back in the agile way, so that it wasn't something that was left, became outdated and ended up that we weren't responding quickly enough. We couldn't afford not to respond quickly. The second piece was around getting that continuity. So yes, we had things that were changing, but how do we stabilise the safety, the operational delivery, and make sure that our passengers and our people could perform what they needed to perform in a safe manner, and we could get people from A to B, again, safely and in comfort. We then moved towards that second wave, after the end of that second wave, the end of that first wave, into really looking at that network return. How do we encourage people to come back to the network? How do we get our people back into the city, not just in Metro, but across the businesses, across the CBD and further? And how do we make sure we delivered it in a business efficient way? So the important thing, obviously, the scenario with dropping patronage equals always a dip in that revenue coming into the business. So to make sure we're sustainable, how do we deliver that and make sure that everything we do is in an efficient way? So we moved into that phase at the end of that first wave, but actually that number 2 and number 3 you see on that slide, we really dipped in and out of that and have continued to do so, whilst trying to maintain and making sure that we focus on still delivering the project work, the big build's still happening. We're navigating to that COVID normal that you see at number 4 there, but really dipping in and out of what is it that's happening at the moment and how do we respond to it and make sure we keep everything moving, but keep our people safe. So that's kind of the direction that we ended up working in. But as I say, that real positive for us, that agile focus that it's given us in everything that we do, we no longer say, actually, we need 3 years to do this. We kind of go, perhaps we need it a bit sooner, and how can we make that happen? So before I go into that true customer focus, if I could just move across to the next slide, and before Maria presses play for me on the video, I'm a really strong believer in images representing thousands of words. So before we play that video, I just want to take you through the next couple of minutes with the video, that if you're familiar with the Melbourne network, I'd really like you to take the opportunity to look and take in the changes that you see to the landscape that there have been in the last 12 months. It doesn't seem like 5 minutes to me, but when we look at the amount of changes that we've seen across the network, they're pretty substantial. It gives me a great pride to see that our people, during these times and with all of the things that have been happening, have still been able to stay there. They've had a smile on their face and they've delivered a great service. Take the opportunity to think about your organisation and where your organisation has continued to also do that. But if I can leave you for a couple of minutes in the hands of without the words, the video with the sound and the images to tell the story of where we've been the last 12 months. If you could play the video, please. Thank you, Maria. I appreciate you managing to integrate that for us to be able to share it. I'm sure you will agree from watching that video and whatever your reflections were of your own organisations as we went through that couple of minutes, that our frontline teams are the people who are doing a great job out there and have continued to do so for the last 12 months. We also have obviously those direct supporting services in the organisation that keep everything running, and we've managed to deliver pretty much a full timetable, in fact with some additional services at points throughout the whole period of the time, to make sure that those essential workers could continue to travel, that we could still get people to the appointments they still needed to attend, and for those who needed to get about and didn't have an alternative, that the train was still available and the public transport network was still available. If I could just go to the next slide. So I think probably it's worth bringing it back just to the basics, and it kind of reflects a little bit as to what Yvette was talking about earlier. But I'm quite keen to make sure that we get a real laser-like focus on our customer experience and not overcomplicate it. It's very, very easy to go into lots of detail on what we're doing when we talk to the front line, and what we want them to do is deliver a really good experience to our customers every day. So they've got to be things in the background, but the more simple we can make it, the better as far as I'm concerned. So in knowing our customers, and some of what Yvette talked about, we've absolutely been doing that at a local level with the Department of Transport, but not reinventing the wheels that are already there. So there is a real focus across the Victorian public transport network in terms of that customer segmentation piece, and using what the Department of Transport have already put in place with a refresh on that to look at what does it mean for our customers now. Since COVID, since the pandemic has been live, what has it done to what people need from their travel? What do they need from us from moment A when they decide to think about public transport through to finishing their journey and wanting to let us know about how it's gone? So for instance, we may look at those cautious users who are a segment that we would look at in knowing our customers and being quite a big proportion of people who travel. What was good for them and what they needed from us as a public transport operator is somewhat different now. They may have been nervous to travel because they didn't necessarily have the right information and all of those types of overlays. But actually, when you look more at that group now, that cautiousness could be around, do they feel comfortable that the network is clean enough to travel on? Is it that they can plan their journey before they travel so that they are spending that minimum period of time travelling? So there's a whole host of different dynamics placed around that segmentation. It may not change the groups of people necessarily who are travelling with us so much, but the dynamics of what they need from our network is somewhat different. Secondly, it's really important to get the right engaged and skilled people. So if we don't get the right people with the right skills in the right roles, we're already onto a non-starter of being able to deliver that great customer experience. We need those right people there. We need them trained in the right way, and we need them to have that smile on their face every day. Particularly challenging given the 12 months that they've just been through, where actually they were the people who were still on the network. We had an opportunity, many of us I'm sure who are on the call today, had that opportunity to be working from home and not be front facing every day. The individuals who are the real stars of this are those engaged and skilled people who are out there delivering every day for us. So we need to keep them engaged, but we also need to make sure that they've got the right skills to get through this. And actually that we make sure we look in on them, so when they are becoming a little fatigued and that smile's dropping a little, that we're able to help them get back to that place. Thirdly, the piece around disciplined delivery. So we have been making sure that our business as usual runs in the background. We still want to make sure our network performs, regardless of what percentage of customers are travelling with us. So there's been a huge focus on embedding the right disciplines around our operation. So whether that be about our drivers having somebody to greet them, a driver team manager on the platform at Flinders Street, able to make sure everything's running smoothly and able to help them out if not, to our stations team who've got a number of levers they can pull when we're delivering on the platform to get the train out on time. So whether that be announcements or they're just to help people on board, the technology that we have on the platform, on the screens that shows when the train is about to depart, that we affectionately call the burn line, means that we are putting everything in place to really get that discipline around our delivery, make sure everybody knows what's expected, but also that the customers help us with that journey. So what they do around the network and their behaviours also assists with making sure that we can deliver on time, safely, and a great experience. I'll move then across to the brilliant communication, and I'll come to it a little bit later, but we take an approach. Obviously, we have, again, had to be very dynamic, very agile in the way in which we've communicated and changed quite a lot of those methodologies. But I think the overarching thing that we've got really right in this area is we kind of have an umbrella approach where the Department of Transport will provide those things that are multimodal. So things like the Next Generation app, the Ride Space app, where you can go and look at capacity that you saw in the video a moment ago, to Metro really focusing on that Twitter, for instance, that gives the service level information about our network, rather than everybody trying to be all things to all people, confusing customers, making it unclear for where they need to go. If we have a single source of information that clearly links out into other information once it becomes more specific, we'll succeed in delivering a real focus for our customers and a great experience. But the thing I think that the last 12 months has taught us, particularly more than anything else, is that if we don't get the basics right, people are not going to have a confidence to travel. So that piece around fundamentally going back to the Maslow's hierarchy, really, of things, of how do we provide that safe, warm, clean network with the right information at hand, so that customers know that they've got a consistent service, and when they travel with us, they know what to expect. The over and above that, the things that we do in innovations and initiatives that are over that are nice to have over and above that. They will impact that return on investment piece and how more people want to travel with us. But fundamentally, if we get those basics right, we're providing the foundation of that experience. Can we move to the next slide, please? So I just want to bring it a little bit closer to home and what it's been like in the last 12 months in getting that customer focus for us. So the basis of everything is around the new timetable. So over the period of the pandemic, we had, as I mentioned a little earlier, we had pretty much a full timetable in operation. And at one point in July last year, we introduced 95 additional services so that we were able to allow people to travel in less congested trains to be able to get across the network. We did have a little dip in our night network not operating during August and September, so that we weren't encouraging people to travel unless it was absolutely essential. But the biggest change for us was at the end of January this year, when we had a complete greenfield timetable, which we'd not had since 2012. So a significant period of time without any change to reflect what was going on in the environment. And I already referred to the big build, which is changing our environment significantly on a daily basis. So that greenfield timetable has really allowed us to look at what we need across the network and get those services to the places they need to, with the right timings in there. And actually, this timetable has introduced over 200 new services for people travelling. Alongside that, and in preparation for that metro tunnel piece that I talked about earlier, we have our new high capacity metro trains coming into operation. You may well have seen them out on the network in their restricted revenue services that we've had operating to do all of the testing before they go live. But by the end of May, we'll have the first of those on the network, and by the end of the year, up to 15 of the overall 65 high capacity metro trains that have been procured. So a real changer in terms of what we have, and starting to look at their 10-car vehicles that you can see from one end to the other with no restrictions. Obviously information that is much more high-tech than we have on some of our older services. So the ability to really look at providing the trains for the future and linking into that high capacity signalling that will be in place when the metro tunnel goes live too. Moving across into preparing our people, it's absolutely essential that during this 12 months and at all times that we are visible as leaders in the business. So because of the limitations that there have been in being face-to-face, we've had to be, again, agile and look at different technologies. So the ability to use things like Microsoft Teams right as far as our frontline teams probably wouldn't have happened quite so quickly. But that's opened up a space for us to do live virtual events, right the way through from Raymond, who's our CEO, through myself and others as leaders in the business, talking to our teams of people live with the ability to ask questions, to demystify things, to allay fears where possible, and to really get that message out there quickly, given things were ever changing. But we've used some of that to also bring in some guides that we will continue to use beyond the pandemic. So some handy guides that get key messages out to our teams. The use of Yammer as a live platform to make sure that there's a two-way communication process that can happen regularly, not just leader to team member, but also team members to help one another out. And that's been invaluable for us too. Back to that basics and building those basics into the network, our hygiene practices, the cleaning, the etiquette, we already had good standards, but that has been upped significantly to make sure that we're doing that 24-hour cleaning, and that we're also able to provide things like the hand sanitizers that have been rolled out across all of our premium stations, working with the Department of Transport. The focus on hygiene, so those regular messages, the posters, the announcements, both on board and on our stations, to make sure that we keep people safe, we keep people reminded of, as things change, what the actual practices are and the etiquette that we would like to see, that we're asking for of our customers, and just making sure that we keep that environment live. Moving across into our customer announcement space and those clear, audible announcements, and again, making sure that's reflected through, making sure that on a daily basis, we don't just do those performance announcements on the platform, but we keep our customers happy as we go, and give them further pieces of information around things like the mask wearing. And then the final piece of the jigsaw for us really is around that digital comms, and I completely, wholeheartedly agree with Yvette. It doesn't have to be the big bang innovations, because sometimes they're not the most impacting, but really looking at some of those digital supports that can really help people. So I mentioned the Next Generation app, I mentioned the rideshare, Ride Space app that the department have introduced, but our focus on getting things live, like the Twitter feeds, to make sure that the information that we give to customers is up to date, and that people can self-serve that information as much as we possibly can, so that if they don't want to be reliant on us providing that information or helping them through the journey, they're able to source it themselves. So I'm going to pause there and leave it there and hand back to Emma. I appreciate we're probably running a little short on time to get over to questions, but thank you for listening.
Thank you, Tilly. We might get Tilly back up on the screen. There we go. So we've got Yvette and Tilly. Now, we don't have an awful lot of time, but we've got quite a few questions. So I might put you on the spot. And if we don't get to all the questions, would you be comfortable in answering them offline and we could circulate the responses? So we have had a question around whether the recording will be circulated. We will share the recording with everybody that registered, and we can use that opportunity to answer any questions that we don't have time for today. Yvette, I might start with you. We've got a question from a self-declared pedantic systems engineer who talks about the generalizing personas, so the customer demographics that you talked about, and sort of creating the customer profiles. They say customers are individuals with subjective preferences. So from a design perspective, what advice can you offer to turn the customer voice into objective, measurable customer experience requirements against which a design could be validated to then lead into construction and operation?
Yep, absolutely. So I won't go into, because personas today, I covered this much of it, and there's a lot more to it. Personas are a representation of a group of customers. So absolutely understand every single customer is unique, and customer experience now is around personalisation and contextualisation. So personas are utilised to try and group as many possible scenarios for similar types of people, individuals together into that group. And so how we then develop objectively is testing that group, and it is around that data-led piece. So I talked at the beginning around that inference that customer experience is light and fluffy. It's very much data-led, and the data itself is what should inform the personas. And so it's very much around outside in rather than inside out, and that in itself reduces a lot of the subjectivity, so that when we're designing systems, tools, processes for the customer, as long as we stick to that data-informed processes, personas, journey maps, and therefore what drives that satisfaction, and it, will be weighted. Some things are more important to some customer types than others. That's how you get those objective results and those objective system development and design.
And it probably just reinforces
the question. If it hasn't, please do a follow-up question.
And highlights the importance of embedding that customer experience perspective throughout all areas of the business, as we sort of touched on at the start. Tilly, you put up that graph of patronage at Metro and how significantly it dropped off. Metro was not alone in that. It was very much a global sort of experience in the public transport space. We've got a question around, what do you see as necessary customer experience actions to restore confidence in public transport?
I think that back to the message that I gave around consistency and getting those basics right has got to be the fundamental foundation of what we put in place. If we don't get that right, then people are not going to feel comfortable to travel. Now, some of that might be reality and some of it may be perception based, but we've got to deal with both of those things. The piece around making sure that we've got the right levels of cleaning in place, the right level of availability of resources like hand sanitisation, liquids and things like that is part of it. But equally, the piece around it's great that the cleaning's taking place, but if nobody ever sees a cleaner, then do they know it's happening? So that visible piece of it might be as straightforward as a high visibility jacket that indicates that that's what the person's doing. Seeing people in action out there, I think that if many of our customers are like me, I need to see to believe often, and that seeing and believing is often where we'll get the confidence of customers back. But I think it's also about, and it probably links a little bit back into not the personas, but that data driven. So listening to what our customers are telling us, and we do have a weekly check-in with the department where we are given information as well as the information we get ourselves that tells us what our customers are saying and what they're looking for and what their pain points are, so that we're really able to keep being agile and keep focusing on what those things are. And it is different things from week to week. So it might be the consistent probably is around mask wearing, and other customers around me are not wearing masks, which is still a requirement on public transport here. And that's something that it's a difficult one to work with, because obviously it's not an enforcement situation, it is encouragement of etiquette. But it is a consistent feedback. So how do we then get the visual messages out there and make sure there's announcements to support that, so that we are getting that message to our customers on a regular basis and doing that reminder, so people see that we're doing as much as we can to make that behaviour happen. Alongside the more unique bits and pieces that we might recognise that we need as we go through. And I guess that's just a case of dealing with them on a business case basis. Is it worthwhile introducing? Is it going to last for the long term? And is it going to get that benefit for customers coming back to the network?
So visibility and also comms. We're out of time. I'm going to get you both to just, what is your #1 priority in the customer experience space this year? Yvette, if we go to you first.
For me, it's ensuring that we have a customer experience circle of excellence. So ensuring that those best practices and concerns are all covered off in a holistic manner that's systematized, but also personalized and contextualized to each jurisdiction.
Right. And Tilly?
I'm going to cheat a little bit. There are two. One is getting customers back to the network, quite simply. But the second is in keeping our people engaged, because if we don't do that, if our frontline are not engaged and are not providing that great customer service, which they are doing, then we haven't got that customer experience and customer focus that we want to deliver.
Absolutely. They've got a tough job out there. There's no doubt about it. Look, a huge thank you to both of you for joining us today. I've had a few messages come through saying thank you and what a wonderful webinar it's been, which we don't always receive. So it's always encouraging to get that feedback. Thank you to everyone who has joined us on our webinar today. As I mentioned, we will circulate a recording, and with that, we'll take the opportunity to cover off on the questions that we haven't had time for. We've got many more webinars coming up as part of the ARA program that Frauscher is sponsoring. Our next webinar is on Wednesday, the 7th of April. You've got the details there on the screen. So looking at an introduction to stress management, where we'll learn about how to thrive through change, and deal with stress. And I think if 2020 has taught us anything, dealing with stress is certainly an important tool to have. So thank you again to Yvette and Tilly. Thank you to those who have dialed in, and wish you all the best and a safe afternoon. Take care.